podcast role. Welcome in.
You're listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast, a proud member of the Podcast Roll Network. You know, there's a moment in every leader's life where someone says, just say yes. And every instinct in your body says, that's a terrible idea. Maybe it's a call you weren't expecting, a role you didn't quite feel ready for, a decision where, you know, the spreadsheet looks neat and tidy, but your gut feels unsettled. Actually, there was a really long conversation today in a meeting I had about whether we like the Google version or Excel. And like universally, everyone liked Excel. So I don't know. I'm curious. You could put that in the comments later on. Tell me 5 stars and yeah, I prefer Sheets, or no, I prefer Excel. Today's episode, though, of An Imperfect Leader, and you don't hear Jamie because we're really close to the holiday here. But you're going to hear from someone who really has built a career on leaning into those moments, not recklessly, but courageously. My guest, Dr. Bryan Luizzi, he's the superintendent of New Canaan Public Schools, and he shares stories that stretch from Connecticut classrooms to school leadership work in Jordan, from innovation that inspired to missteps that humbled. And this is really a conversation about saying yes, about learning in public, and about what it really means to lead people, not systems, not structures, but human beings. And so stick with me through the conversation, because when we do come back, I want to reflect on what Bryan's stories really invite all of us to do and all of us to consider as leaders. So we'll see you in a minute. You're listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. I'm Peter Stiepelman, and I'm usually Jamie Almanzon. I don't know why he had to have such a high voice, and we'll see you on the other side. Today on An Imperfect Leader, Dr. Bryan Luizzi is my guest. Bryan's been the superintendent of the New Canaan Public Schools in New Canaan, Connecticut since 2014. Bryan began his teaching career at the Newtown High School as an English teacher. He also served as the manager of technology operations for Newtown Public Schools, and he then served in a number of administrative positions in the Brookfield school system, was principal of Brookfield High School for 5 years, then became the principal of New Canaan High School, and then the superintendent. Bryan, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Thank you, Peter. I am absolutely thrilled to be here with you on your podcast. As you may or may not know, I've admired you and your work as superintendent and school leader since the day we met at ASA, and I consider it a privilege to be here with you and to call you a friend and a colleague.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Bryan, it is so good to see you too. And what's been fun about doing this podcast has been obviously being able to meet lots of leaders from all over the nation, as well as having these mini reunions with leaders that I've had the privilege to know for a number of years. For those who are listening, as Bryan just mentioned, he and I were in the same cohort at AASA's National Superintendent Certification Program. And this is what I think I remember. I remember that, yes, you were this really impressive superintendent. And then you were also working as a professor at the University of Connecticut, and you were teaching courses in school and district leadership, policy, climate and culture, curriculum development, design. And all of that was interesting to me for sure. But it was the opportunity to support principal development in the Middle East. I think it was in Jordan. That was really fascinating to me. And I wonder, would you tell us just a little bit about the work in Jordan, your role in that work, and maybe the ways that it's been rewarding for you?
I am so glad that you asked me about that. It was all the way back in 2016, which was BC, right before COVID. So it feels 50 years ago, and I haven't thought about it or talked about it in a while. So I'm really thrilled that you asked that question. My involvement in the program was really thanks to some good luck, being at the right place at the right time. And I believe a mindset that I've learned through my leadership practice, which simply is to lead with yes. I was invited to participate when a professor from UConn unexpectedly was unable to. And instead of telling myself all the reasons why it was a crazy idea and why it would upend my life and how challenging it would be, I simply said yes. And things just sort of moved very quickly from there. So that approach has worked pretty well in my life and my career. It's been a guiding mindset, definitely through the pandemic, where we were challenged with a variety of different things. Instead of thinking about why we couldn't or shouldn't do something, we started with yes and figured it out from there. And it worked very well with my experiences in Jordan. So I had the great privilege of traveling to Jordan twice. I was 10 days for each trip. And while I was there, I taught approximately 40 principals about curriculum, instruction, assessment on one of the trips, and then school climate and culture on the second trip. Each day was about 8 hours long. My slides were translated into Arabic, and every session was live translated by two incredibly brilliant translators sitting in the back. And we all wore mics and had headsets on. and I heard their voices throughout the days. It was something that in my professional life, certainly nothing could have prepared me to be out there and to be doing this and experiencing it. And that happens often in these roles, I think, where preparation is inadequate and we just have to learn by doing. So as I stood up in the front of the room and looked out over these 40 or so Jordanian principals, some of whom traveled for hours to be there every day, wearing that headset and talking into the mic, we learned together, we laughed together, lots of really great stories from that. And it was, as for me as a youngish sort of somebody transitioning into the superintendency, it was equal parts, I think, humbling, thrilling, terrifying, and inspiring. It really was amazing. So I came back with lots and lots of stories, pictures, experiences, but I think most importantly, the feedback I received from the participants was very positive, where even one of the ministers said, I now know what a balanced assessment system is. It's not what we're doing, but it is what we have to do. I'm totally committed to doing this work in our schools. And that's what it was about. For me, what I learned, I mean, that's a whole nother podcast in and of itself. And you opened a can of worms here for me as I started thinking about Jordan again and reflecting on it. But I think a couple of things were the inspiration that comes from learning with and from such committed and curious professionals. They care so deeply about the work. And it was really great to re-engage on that level, people that are eager and excited learners. It also was a really powerful reminder of how difficult it is to truly teach well. I spent months preparing for each week in Jordan. I worked through the night, early in the morning, while I was there to refine every single day as I was going in the classes. The work that went into before, during, afterwards, just was incredible. Luckily, we didn't keep track of it, nor does UConn pay by the hour. But afterwards, I really returned with a sense of awe for what happens in our classrooms and for what it takes to truly engage and be successful in teaching and learning in our classrooms. So I often share that our profession as educators is the most important profession on the planet. We are together and literally co-creating the future in our classrooms. This was a great reminder that everywhere in the world, from Connecticut to Missouri to Jordan, anywhere, schools provide transformational experiences for our students, and nothing can be more noble, challenging, or important for all of us. So it really was a life-altering experience in a variety.
It sounds like it. I had the opportunity to give a talk in Japan where I was superintendent. We had a sister city in Western Japan in a city of Hakusan. And I remember my translator said to me that if I continued to make jokes in my presentation, because I like to think that I was somewhat charming, she said, if you keep making jokes, I'm just going to tell them, he made a joke. Please laugh. Because it's so hard to translate your jokes. So I just imagined you giving this talk in Jordan. And just because I know you, and the way that you disarm people is through just how gregarious and how incredibly attentive you are to people and to the human side of people, that I imagine they're going, oh, here comes another one. So
well, a quick story. So the cultural translations are so challenging. So one of the things I did each time I went out there was bring swag from my district. So I brought New Canaan cups and mugs and shirts or whatever, brought them and gave them out to the students there as a gift and just as welcome. And they saw that we are the New Canaan Rams. And so I handed them out and they all started snickering a little bit and they were laughing. And so some of them came together and a couple of them had some broken English and they asked me, why Rams? Like, why New Canaan Rams? And I went into a long explanation about mascots and how they work to inspire and to energize and the positive role of sports and athletics in our communities. And they were still laughing. They said, yeah, but why Ram? And I said, why? Because Ram is strong. And they said, no, Dr. Bryan, we castrate our Rams. And I thought, oh, that didn't translate well.
Doesn't translate. So similarly, I thought it would be fun to show them the mascots of our 4 high schools. And so we had the Bulldogs and we had the Bruins and we had the Spartans and we have the Kewpies. The Kewpies it's the only high school in the nation that has this naked baby as a mascot. And I thought, how funny, huh? And they said, yes, funny. Although not for the reason that you think it's funny, it's because our most popular mayonnaise is Kewpie mayonnaise. And so then on the mayonnaise is this baby doll. So, your mascot is our mayonnaise. But that's an interesting point. I mean, so the castrated Rams, the Kewpie doll, I mean, those on such a simple level, you can see when you consider the fact that your community, my community, in so many ways, in international communities, and just trying to navigate a new system. I just think about so many of our children around the nation who have had very different experiences, who may be refugees in our school districts, and we're trying to push very hard on curriculum when we need to also take that step back and recognize that cultural transition of sort of acclimating to what is a very foreign system.
Absolutely. That's such a powerful and important point. Even when you think about what it takes for children to learn academic language when they come over, because they understand the word explain doesn't mean they understand it in the context of academia and what we're actually asking them to do and write and think. And yeah, it's really takes some time for all of us that are swimming in the water to take a step back and to understand what that challenge is like. And it's a learn by doing kind of thing. I think until you're in an environment, I had never been to Jordan before I started teaching there. I wasn't a part of the early reconnaissance and the setup that UConn had done. And Jordan's a fascinating place. The people were so dedicated, as I said. The government, it's a centralized education system. And the cultures run so deep, obviously. I read what I could. I had some friends who sent me some things from their travel departments, corporate world and other things. And they were sending me those things to read and learn from. But while I was there, you just had to give it a try. And I certainly didn't do everything correctly all the time, but they knew I was trying, and that was enough.
That's an important piece. When people know that your heart is there, then they provide incredible grace. In the leadership model I've been using to advise others, there's this dimension called nested patterns, which is really sort of the muscle of an organization. It speaks to how people behave. And inside that dimension is a term, creativity and courage. And I love how general that term is, because it could speak to an individual's pursuit of creativity. It could speak to the ability to be a risk taker. But when combined, it really describes an organization's ability to innovate. Innovation, after all, requires the ability to see something that others may not yet see, and it requires courage to go for it. So when I look at your school district, there's this history of innovation. I mean, more than 50 years ago, your community, New Canaan, chose to invest in a planetarium instead of a swimming pool. And that's when everyone else was constructing pools, and they chose to go in a different direction. And I wonder if you would tell us just a little bit about the role of innovation in your school district. And also, tell us a little bit about this planetarium.
Oh, I would love to. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, because I think that people in society do our educators and our schools a disservice when they equate public schools with traditional pedagogy and approaches. In my experience, I've found our schools to be incubators for amazing, creative, inspiring ideas. And as I've moved through different positions, I've made it my goal to sort of foster that type of innovation and to build upon it wherever we find it, wherever it grows. That whole approach is sort of aligned with my lead with yes approach, right? That a lot of people think as they take on more and more responsibility as educational leaders, that it becomes their responsibility to find the potential downsides and pitfalls of new ideas and things people are thinking about or talking about. And I disagree with that. I think our responsibility is to say yes and to grow and to build together and to see what can come next. It's our schools here in New Canaan. We have a long tradition of success, as you mentioned, which can be the quickest way to fail. I've found that the best superintendents, those that I respect the most, they know how to balance the responsibilities of stewardship with leadership. I think, as an example, I go back to the books I used to read as a child, and Lord of the Rings was certainly formative for me. And I think back about how the steward of Gondor oversees a realm that's slowly decaying, and it's decaying because of their commitment and adherence to the past, right? There's no action happening. They're looking backwards and they're trying to hold on to a past glory. And it's only with the return of the king or the leader where Gondor once again flourishes and grows and looks forward to a brighter future. They have to embrace uncertainty to do that. But it's only in embracing that potential of what's possible that we can truly realize the future that we want. So I think that balance of stewardship and leadership is a piece of what it takes to develop a spirit of innovation within our schools. With our district success, it's our responsibility to support innovative practices and to see what's possible, not just for our kids here in New Canaan, I think, but for students throughout the region, throughout the state, maybe even beyond. Because when we have proof of concept here, it becomes our goal to try to share that with others if they're interested and to try to push that outwards. That I do see that as a professional responsibility for us and all schools, right? As we do these things and we find what works, to share them. I've benefited through the years from others doing just that kind of work. And I think if we as professionals can rely more on each other and share these ideas in a spirit of cooperation and sharing, we can celebrate our wins together. I think it'll help all of us. That work here takes many forms with innovation. We actually created a new position called our Director of Innovation, and we hired a dynamic, visionary educator into that role. She'd been with us for a while, and it was just a perfect step. As an initial kind of foray into this, we've been transforming our libraries into design labs, into think spaces. We're purposely creating spaces where students can collaborate, fabricate, iterate, and then create solutions to relevant problems that they're being posed. And we have an innovation committee that's been meeting for the last couple of years to learn and to experience this design process together. For instance, as an English teacher, when I used to put students together in groups, my first thing would be to ask them to put a plan together. So work together, build a plan. Let me see that plan. Take a look. All right, maybe we'll tweak it a little bit. All right, go and implement your plan. And I felt pretty good, like I was doing things the right way. Turns out I wasn't necessarily. It wasn't the bad way, but a better way to do that would be to get students into groups and have them start wrestling with the problem. Don't ask them to sit together and create a plan, because what happens then is one or two ideas rule the day and they go down this path and that's that. Instead, let them experiment, let them iterate with whatever it is they're doing. And then the best rises to the top and everybody gets on board in building or working through that problem with that solution and get to the better place. Everybody's involved. And they've tried different solutions and they've iteratively worked their way through the term is failing forward, by trying, maybe not getting it exactly right the first time, but that's the point. That's how we live our lives. That's how we learn. And that shift in mindset and approach can work at all levels and across all disciplines. Lots of exciting work going on there. And you asked me to mention the planetarium. Love to talk about the planetarium. As you said, built in the 1970s, it served our students so well through the years. But the 1970s were the last significant investment in it as well. So as technology has changed, that stayed as a dots on the dome type of space. So what we've done, instead of looking at just replacing the projector, we really brought a team together to say, what is the potential of this space? And so what we're doing, we're transforming this space on the third floor of our high school into an interactive learning theater that provides collective, immersive learning experiences for students of all ages. And if that's pretty cool. And I think that sounds fascinating and inspiring, but there's even more to it. And my favorite part of it is the technology today is so advanced that our students and staff won't just be there to consume other people's content, but they'll also have the tools to create their own content. Or very early in my career, I heard a quote that good schools teach students to understand, great schools empower students to create. And that's what we're doing here. That's what we're looking at in the dome. Really, the planetarium wasn't enough. A planetarium sort of has its own function and role and is fascinating and important, but we decided to rebrand it as the dome. So today's technology empowers us to create things that were unimaginable just a couple of years ago. But today, if you can imagine it, you can create it. And for students to be empowered to exhibit their creations in this newly renovated dome with their classmates and teachers and others, I think really it's a next step or leap forward in innovation and innovative thinking in our schools.
You know, when I think about you talking about the fact that students will have the ability to show their own work, and I just have this image of a class coming in, sort of reclining in this sort of traditional planetarium seats, looking up at this dome and seeing student projects, whether it be taking their being able to demonstrate their learning in a different way, but in such a creative and engaging way. I think those are the moments that students will never forget when they think about and they look back on their experiences in your schools. Do you remember we went to the planetarium, we were able to show the movies we made or the projects we created, to me, it just seems so inspiring.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And although it's in the high school, the way that we are designed as a town, 3 of our 5 schools are within walking distance to it, and the other 2 are relatively close. So it's not only our high school kids, but we see our middle school, elementary students, everybody getting involved and really learning this. So when I think about 5, 7, 10 years from now, I believe our students will be creating content that surpasses anything that's available today. And really just their imagination and the opportunity for them to create and display. And we're even talking about not just for kids and classmates in school, but with the community, opening this up. So imagine creating something, inviting your friends and family from outside, others to come together and to experience it all as a collective and immersive type of experience in that dome. It's been really inspiring to think of what we'll be able to do, and just the wisdom of our building committee, those 50 or so years ago, and making that decision. I see it is our responsibility to build upon that. And
yeah. I mean, it really was. That was a legacy project in 1970 to think about what an opportunity to be able to stand on those shoulders, look back to genuinely say thank you for their wisdom and their future thinking, and then to give you this responsibility of thinking what the next 50 years looks like. So neat.
Yeah.
Bryan, I ask this question of every guest who comes on the podcast, and I wonder if you'd give me your thoughts on this. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate with you?
It resonates deeply with me, not just as a superintendent, but as a father, as a spouse, and in all areas of my life, as a husband. Chasing perfection is a fast track to disappointment and despair. The background on my laptop actually has a picture that my daughter drew for me once years ago, and it says, "In all that we do, strive for excellence, not perfection." I think that's should be our focus and our goal. I love that when I saw the name of your podcast as An Imperfect Leader, I thought, gosh, that just sums it up in such a tight way, because we should be striving for excellence. I do believe that. As educators, we have an enormous responsibility to do that. But perfection is impossible. And we've seen, all of us, how chasing perfection can result in people being frozen in place. If you're afraid you might be wrong, you won't take the risk of being right. So I used to teach a course in modernism and mythology at Newtown High School, which you mentioned earlier. And in the course, we spent some time learning and discussing Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, right? The whole cycle of a hero's journey. And we talked about what are some of the reasons why people might reject the call. Because often that call to adventure in the very beginning of the hero's journey, many people do reject that call. And it really does go to that fear of failure, fear of imperfection, and a concern of loss. Those were the reasons the kids often shared. So it was a good way even then for them to be thinking about how chasing perfection is just is a fool's task. Imperfection, I love that term. It's not flawed. I don't see it as weak. I think perfection itself frankly, is kind of boring when you think about, as that really should be your goal. I think the best way to be excellent is to continually challenge yourself, grow through experiences, kind of lead with yes, and see what comes. Because I think that we need to be confident in ourselves and those around us and accept the journey that's before us.
Such valuable advice. Almost as valuable as Mithril. We'll see.
Well, now that's a whole nother level.
I know. There you go. Oh, man. I will tell you that when our chief HR officer decided that she was going to retire, and she decided in May or something. And so I was talking with our assistant superintendent, who said, "I'm the best one for this." And I said, "I know." And I said, "Are you a Lord of the Rings fan by any chance?" "Not really." I was like, "Okay, stick with me." And I was like, when Frodo says, "I'll carry the ring," right? And Gandalf sort of looks and is sort of knows that he's sort of sent Frodo to his certain death. But he knows that Frodo's the only one who could possibly do it. I was like, right now I feel somewhat like Gandalf sort of saying, "I know, yeah, you're right. Yeah. And I'm sending you to Mount Doom."
That's right.
She's like, "Okay, I'll just take your word for it." Because I told you I really don't know anything about Lord of the Rings.
I knew it was inevitable, but I still hoped it wouldn't happen.
All right, exactly.
Hey, district leaders, I know you already know this. In schools worldwide, cell phones are posing real challenges on student engagement and mental well-being, and I want you to meet Yonder, a proud sponsor of An Imperfect Leader. And let me share this story from a visit I made to some schools in Silicon Valley. I asked some kids what they liked about Yonder, and after some funny looks, they shared that actually, with Yonder, teachers don't have to battle with them over phones anymore. In fact, one kid said to me he didn't have to worry anymore about his parents texting him in class, and the kid next to him sort of shoved him and goes, "Texting? My mom used to FaceTime me in class." I want to introduce you to a support system that increases teaching and learning. I want you to discover why 1 million students choose Yonder daily. Minimize distractions, maximize learning potential. To learn more, go to overyonder.com. YONDR.
So I want to talk a minute about the Mosaic Project. It is one of our favorite organizations and has over 25 years of experience empowering students to really celebrate differences, communicate assertively, and resolve conflict peacefully at their outdoor school. I happen to have experience being part of the Mosaic Project, and so I can absolutely tell you it's an amazing organization. Their innovative SEL curriculum is now available to our Imperfect Leader audience. And so you can get a 10% discount through their new documentary film-based Mosaic Classroom Project. So just let the people know during your onboarding process to receive that 10% discount is to just mention An Imperfect Leader. Learn more about the Mosaic Project at mosaicproject.org.
This is Greg Meyer, Jamie's partner at APC Leadership Collaborative. Superintendents know that school principals are the single biggest lever that any school district has for improving student joy and success. Unfortunately, there's very little professional development for the specific things that a principal has to do to improve their school. At APC Leadership Collaborative, we specialize in coaching principals to take on audacious goals, build their leadership skills, and make big improvements in their school. If that inspires you, let's connect and talk about how we can collaborate. Find APC Leadership Collaborative online at apccolab.com.
When leaders think in systems, they think differently. They see the big picture, making decisions that create coherence and strengthen communication across their teams. They build adaptability, flexibility, and engagement. Every day, school leaders face complex challenges, from student engagement to staff alignment. What if your team could see those challenges as part of a bigger picture? That's what happens when you think in systems. It's how leaders turn complexity into connection and challenges into opportunities for growth. At the Waters Center for Systems Thinking, we help educators and organizations build this capacity, developing the habits and tools that turn vision into action. Think differently, think in systems. Sign up for our webinars, free resources, or a consultation by visiting our website, which you can find in the show notes.
We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership and After Action. My guest today is Dr. Bryan Luizzi, the superintendent of the New Canaan Public Schools in New Canaan, Connecticut. And in this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision that they had to make, and then we discuss a little bit. Bryan, what happened?
Great question. I have so many to choose from. So I thought that following along the themes of overseas trips, I would talk about what happened when I returned from a trip to Finland back in the mid-2000s when I was a high school principal. Finland had just performed very well on PISA. They were all the rage. Everybody wanted to learn from Finland and the Finland example. A group came together through Michael Mino was his name with the Education Connection at the time, which is a regional service center. And I just sort of threw my name in the hat and boom, there I got picked. And between Ed lead that group and Central Connecticut, we took a trip out to Finland for 10 days. And while we were there, we went to visit K-12 schools. We saw universities. We went and visited businesses. It was amazing. There's so many things to learn, an amazing trip. One of the trips, we went into a hypermedia lab where they were working on computer design and gaming. And they had their physicists, computer scientists, artists, musicians, everybody working together on a project. And it was really amazing to see that type of an approach. It seemed so different than what we were trying to do and teach students for back home. And so I came back after the experience with lots and lots of great ideas. We started with a couple of maybe piece of low-hanging fruit. I convinced the English department not to grade homework, to just make it worth 1% instead of the 20% or 10%. And a few of them tried it and they reported that it worked. And we started to gain momentum about that. And people shifted to really minimizing the impact of homework on the overall grade. I thought, great, that's working pretty well. We did a few other things that were working. And I thought, okay, now's the time. We're going to. And I thought about it a little bit and decided the next move would be to shift our semesters and marking periods instead of 9-week marking periods and 18-week semesters into 3 6-week terms that then added up to the 18-week semester. Seemed to make sense. The math worked, and it seemed to be aligned with what we were encouraging people to do, which was to give feedback more frequently to kids and to families. So we went for it. Seemed like a great idea at the time. The teachers were a little skeptical, but I told them, don't change anything. Keep doing what you're doing, and you'll just be reporting the grades a little bit more often. I thought, hey, this is, if nothing else, I will get away from the 9-week Shakespeare units and try to tighten things up a little bit and really move along. They skeptically went into the year. I very excitedly went into the year, and it was a total disaster.
Oh, no. Okay, so what got overlooked?
Oh, it was totally bombed. The terms, because I told them don't change anything, they didn't. They took me at my word. So the terms were ending mid-units. Sometimes they were ending before they even had a larger summative assessment to use. So it all became sort of formative work that they were trying to work out and try to grade. As a result, the grades were all over the place. Kids that were typically would perform at a certain level were up or down, or where else the students didn't have a chance to correct mistakes or to make up missing work because those 6 weeks were so tight. By the time you're into it, you're almost done. The student athletes, they were suddenly ineligible in different times in different ways because their grades put them out of eligibility because they might have had a couple of Fs in there where they never had enough before because they didn't have a chance to take the test and to study for it or whatever. It was just a total disaster that rippled all throughout the system. And as I thought about it, there's lots of mistakes I made along the way, but I really tried to bring about an adaptive change with a technical solution, as Ron Heifetz would tell us. And I didn't work at all on the hearts and minds. I just said, we're going to do, instead of 9 and 18, we're going to do 6 and 18. And the math worked. So it had to work. And it just didn't. And it took a lot of soul searching and reflection to sit across the table from some of the parents and kids and the staff and others as the year sort of unfolded to say, yeah, I didn't anticipate this, or I didn't anticipate that. But I will say this, it's probably one of the most formative and important parts of my career as a school leader. So I wouldn't recommend anyone do it because it's grading can be the third rail. It's the third rail for
That's
sure.
right. Yeah. Ask any superintendent who has either now inherited or is embarking on standards reference grading, standards-based grading. All of that work is incredibly, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of explaining. And I can imagine from your perspective and from what you have learned from parents, and yeah, it is the third rail in terms of schools. I wonder if you wouldn't mind walking us a little bit back, and because I hadn't even thought about the student athlete piece about becoming eligible or ineligible rather quickly. I could also imagine that parents, as you were sitting across from them, that there was a sense of surprise that this was being done, and potentially without including them in that process. And so I wonder, what did you learn about relationships, or what new relationships were formed?
I learned so much about relationships in this experience. And I think that's one of the reasons why I say that in the long run, I'm glad it happened. Nobody was severely hurt throughout the process. We worked our way through it. But what I learned was to be real, to be my authentic self in those conversations, the empathy that I felt for the students, for parents, for the staff, for people going through a change that was of a magnitude that we didn't anticipate. I learned that I could have written up all the reasons why we did it and appealed to logic all day long. That wasn't what this was all about. This is about, hey, we made a change trying to make things better. It didn't do the things that we had anticipated that it would do, and did a few things that we didn't anticipate. And so we're going to figure this out together, and we're going to solve this problem. And people rose to that. They came to me, we came together, and we figured it out. And we made sure that we didn't hurt our kids. We made sure that the staff figured out what they had to do. We worked through it all. And it was very humbling. It was important for me to have that experience too, because when you go, I went to Finland, had these great ideas. Was fresh out of my doctoral program at Teachers College. I was a newly minted principal. I was so excited, and I still am, but gosh, it was like the world was all ahead of me, and there's so many things to do. And it just taught me to think deeply about the importance of the work we're doing. We love to be innovative. We love to experiment. We love to try new things, but always do it with the folks around you, part of the discussion, the conversation, the decision, and the implementation. A good idea poorly implemented is a bad idea. And it's our responsibility to continuously improve as public schools everywhere on behalf of the children. We do the most important work on the planet, but we don't do it in isolation. We need to do it, and we need to bring our authentic selves to the conversations, to those that we serve, and make sure that they know that we hear them and value and respect them, and that we are together in the work that we're doing.
So I really think in a lot of ways you sort of addressed the last 3 bullets, or at least 2 of them, in terms of what was frustrating. It seems as if you entered this new role with incredible enthusiasm, a sense of urgency, great possibilities, visiting a country that is known for its innovation and creativity, and bringing that back to your own new experience. And yet somewhat frustrating that it didn't occur to you, at least immediately, that you needed to make these decisions with people, not just for them. And then it seems like when you think back on what you could have done differently, it was, okay, so I was frustrated that this happened, yet what I could have done differently was really explore, similar to the example you gave earlier about when doing student work, instead of just telling them get together and come up with a plan, but rather allow some thinking, some group thought, the harvesting of the collective wisdom of those who are in a group to move together. And that in the end, that as you have now approached new challenges and opportunities,
that you've sort of dug back into, or at least anchored yourself into this past experience as a way to push forward and know that you're not doing it alone. Does that sound somewhat accurate?
It does. And the lessons from that early experience for me have informed my practice ever since. For instance, in the pandemic, we were in a time of complete uncertainty and challenge. And that authentic voice, just telling the truth, putting it out there, and a call to action for people to work together to solve our problems together really resonated for an awful lot of people. The experience at the high school there, where we went to the 6-week terms, I mean, the silver lining around it, or at least the positive outcome, was in the conversations with staff as we talked through what worked and what didn't and why. We put a team together that really then looked at the whole schedule, everything that we were doing, our use of time. Because another outcome of my time in Finland was the understanding that the United States is very different than most of the rest of the world. We measure teachers' time by the minutes they spend in front of children. We call that working, and anything else not working. And in Finland and other places, they're working when they're working together to improve that time that they are then with children. It's all the work. But we think the more teacher face time in a classroom with kids, that they're working harder the more minutes they have with children. So with that mindset shift, we came together as a group and created actually a new schedule for all kids K-12 that included some really valuable and important things, like 25 minutes of reading for every child every day. We put in an advisory. We put in collaborative work teams for teachers, where once every 4 days they would meet for 80 minutes and they taught similar classes. So it was a professional learning model early on, and it was all embedded in the day. So that's where we got, which was a really great place to be. We just had to sort of run through some other experiences first. And then when they knew that I'd be honest about what happened and that I'd put it all on the table, it built a trust in a way that I don't think anything else could. That they trusted that, hey, Bryan's going to tell us the truth. He is, if it works, great. If it doesn't, he'll be upfront with us. And that's when I talk about bringing our authentic self to work, to all of our relationships. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not here trying to say or do what I think a superintendent should say or do. I'm here doing what I believe as an educator, as an educational leader, as Bryan Luizzi, to be the right thing. And that tone and that voice, that authenticity, I think is a really important lesson that we learn sometimes in tough ways through the experiences that we have.
Bryan, you continue to inspire me. And I know just hearing from you today will inspire others around the nation who are listening to this podcast and trying to just figure out how to tackle those complex issues associated with the superintendency, engaging internal, external stakeholders, this experience that you went through in terms of really learning mostly like, how do we use time and what do we want for children? How do we want to be together? Just looking for that common ground while maintaining one's moral focus. It's just so important. You've clearly are approaching it and doing it. And so I just thank you so much for joining me.
It's absolutely been my pleasure. And thank you for the highlight of my day. And thank you for your ongoing contributions to our work, as hosting this podcast is such a gift for me when I get it in my inbox each week and I'm able to listen to it and hear from my colleagues and friends. And I'm learning so much from those who you're speaking with. So thank you for doing it. It's what we all should be doing, finding ways that we can continue to make positive contributions locally and broader. And I'm grateful, Peter. Thank you.
Okay, we're back. And, as I reflect on this conversation, I just keep coming back to one central idea, that human-centered leadership is not about getting it right. It's about being real. And it's about honesty when things don't work, and humility when we miss something important, and courage to stay present when the work gets uncomfortable. And, Bryan, he's so great. I mean, he reminds us that leadership isn't about perfection or control, that it's about relationships, and it's about listening, and it's about creating conditions where people feel seen and trusted and invited into the work with us, not just expected to carry it for us. And, as this episode drops, I feel especially fitting to pause and reflect. Hanukkah and Christmas have just come to a close. We're in Kwanzaa right now. Ramadan is less than a month away. Across traditions and cultures, this is a season that calls us back to what matters most: family, community, generosity, reflection. So my hope for you as a leader and as a human being is that you find a little space in these days ahead space to rest, space to reconnect, space to remember that leadership at its best, it's an act of care. So whatever and however you're celebrating, I wish you a very peaceful and joyful holiday season and a new year. Thank you for listening. Thanks for being a consistent listener to the podcast. And thank you for leading imperfectly and with heart. Take care.
Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created our artwork, a wood print inspired Daruma doll butterfly. Remember, imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It's a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader. We are proud to be imperfect leaders, so join us next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendent and Leadership Podcast.